Imagine for a moment that you had in your hands the ability to see everything that happens inside a fortune. Every dollar that comes in, every strategic movement, every hidden risk that could destroy years of achievement. Now, imagine that this ability not only prevents losses but also opens doors to opportunities that the rest of the world will only notice months or even years later. This is the power of internal audit systems when used by the ultra-wealthy. They work like invisible radars, capturing signals that go unnoticed by most people. And the curious thing is that when we look back at history, we realize that the ultra-rich of every era, pharaohs, emperors, merchants, and today's billionaires, have always relied in one form or another on mechanisms of auditing to preserve and multiply their power. Today you will discover how this practice, which may seem bureaucratic and cold, is in fact one of the greatest differentiators behind the survival of financial empires throughout human history. The idea of internal auditing may sound modern, but it is almost as old as civilization itself. In ancient Egypt, around 3000 BC, the storage of grain was vital for the survival of society. Famine could lead to the collapse of an entire kingdom. For this reason, scribes were appointed not only to count the grain in storehouses, but to audit the records of those responsible. Every discrepancy was investigated. For the pharaohs, auditing was not just about wealth, but about political power and social stability. In Mesopotamia, clay tablets reveal meticulous records of commercial transactions, loans, and taxes. Here we already see the first evidence that the wealthy of that time understood that information itself was wealth. The merchant with accurate records could collect debts, plan harvests, and expand his trade. In the Roman Empire, the process became even more sophisticated. Censors and quaestors were respected figures because they oversaw tax collection, military expenditures, and infrastructure contracts. Rome did not become the center of the ancient world only because of its legions, but also because it had mechanisms to audit every resource extracted from conquered peoples. And this brings us to the first great lesson the ultra-rich have repeated throughout history. Never rely solely on loyalty. Always create mechanisms to validate the truth. Blind trust destroys empires, solid auditing builds legacies. As international maritime trade exploded between the 15th and 17th centuries, wealth began to concentrate in the hands of investors who financed ocean voyages. The risks were enormous: pirates, storms, and wars between kingdoms. How could an investor trust that his capital would return multiplied? It was in this context that more elaborate auditing practices emerged. The East India Companies, for example, demanded meticulous reports of every voyage. Independent clerks recorded everything: the cost of goods loaded, the condition of ships, and the value collected at the destination. The ultra-wealthy who financed these expeditions, often kings and nobles, thus had a control mechanism that allowed them to quickly decide where to reinvest and where to cut their losses. These audit reports were the Google Analytics of their time. Without them, investors would have been sailing blind. With them, they could see trends and transform risk into expansion. As the Industrial Revolution advanced in the 19th century, new financial dynasties emerged. Families such as the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers realized that the growing complexity of business demanded increasingly sophisticated control mechanisms. John D. Rockefeller, for example, was not just a visionary industrialist. He was obsessed with internal data. He built a system in which auditors verified not only multi-million-dollar oil contracts, but even the smallest logistical expenses. This allowed him to detect inefficiencies invisible to competitors and increase profit margins at every stage of his empire. And here lies something fascinating. The ultra-wealthy understand that fortunes are not built in a single leap, but in the accumulation of thousands of correct decisions. Internal auditing is the compass that keeps them on course while competitors lose their way in financial storms. At the beginning of the 20th century, auditing became institutionalized. Giant corporations like General Motors, IBM, and Standard Oil established permanent audit departments to oversee contracts, review accounts, map regulatory risks, and monitor internal fraud. While to the general public the word audit sounded boring, to the ultra-wealthy it was a competitive edge. It was the invisible safety net that guaranteed family fortunes would not vanish through administrative mistakes. It was during this period that the modern mindset of the ultra-rich solidified. Auditing is not about finding culprits, but about preventing collapses before they appear. Fast forward to the present. Today, the ultra-wealthy play on an entirely different level. Their internal audit systems are digital fortresses, able to analyze millions of transactions in real time. Artificial intelligence detects suspicious patterns in milliseconds. Auditing is continuous rather than annual. Compliance is global. Every new investment is examined not just by accountants but also by specialists in international law, cybersecurity, and political risk. It is as if each great fortune had its own private war radar, constantly scanning the horizon for incoming storms. And here is a mental trigger for you. Have you noticed that some billionaire families remain wealthy for generations, while others lose everything within 2 decades? The answer almost always lies in how they audit and control their own wealth. If this journey into the secret world of the ultra-rich is sparking your curiosity, subscribe right now to Investor School. Here you will discover the hidden side of investment, the strategies that shape the destinies of great fortunes, and the secrets that rarely reach the public. Hit that subscribe button and get ready to see the money game from a completely new perspective. The true power of internal auditing does not lie in correcting the past, but in anticipating the future. The ultra-rich know that an unchecked failure today can become a massive crisis tomorrow. That is why, when they hire audit teams, they are not only looking for fraud or accounting mistakes, they are shielding their wealth against global risks, wars, recessions, regulatory changes, and even cyber attacks. This mindset of prevention is what separates the ordinary investor from the legendary one. While many people act only when a problem arises, the ultra-rich are always a few steps ahead. If we broaden our perspective, we see that internal auditing systems are in fact a reflection of humanity's survival instinct. Scribes counted grain to prevent famine. Romans audited taxes to sustain the empire. Renaissance merchants audited voyages to expand trade routes. Industrial tycoons audited contracts to consolidate monopolies. And today's billionaires audit digital data to perpetuate dynasties. Humanity has always advanced by auditing, controlling, reviewing, and improving its own processes. The ultra-wealthy are simply the most concentrated example of this millennia-old pattern. And here comes the part that often goes unnoticed. You might not have a billion-dollar fortune to audit, but the principles used by the ultra-rich can be applied at any scale. Create the habit of periodically reviewing your investments. Monitor personal expenses as if you were running a company. Set up small warning systems for financial risks. What separates the ultra-wealthy is not just access to advanced tools, but the discipline of never neglecting the process. Looking back at history, an invisible thread connects pharaohs, merchants, industrialists, and digital billionaires. They all understood that wealth is not only about acquiring more, but about controlling better. Internal audit systems are the backbone that sustains financial empires, protects dynasties, and turns risks into opportunities. They prove that wealth is not an accident, but a continuous act of control, discipline, and foresight. If you want to think like a true investor, you must see auditing not as bureaucracy, but as a strategy of survival and expansion. And this is exactly the kind of mindset we will continue to explore here at Investor School.